Well, we are in the midst of a series. We are in week 4, actually, so we're right in the middle of it. And we're going 7 weeks on this series called You Can't Sleep Through Your Awakening. And while that might seem obvious, we actually we belie that truth in a lot of times the way we handle our journey of life and how we handle our spiritual journey, in fact, is what we feel that many times we are very earnest and sincere in our spiritual work and our prayers and our meditations and our studies, and we're very sincere about that, and we are. And yet there's a lot of the other times through the content and the context of our lives that we are mindless of ways that we are sort of being counterproductive, that I am sort of sabotaging my own spiritual growth because I refuse to entertain the idea that I could be in the way of God instead of the way of God. Yes? Anyone relate to this? The same 4 people. I don't know what it is every week, but besides offering incentives for the Yelp review, we may, every hand that goes up, a free daily word. No, I'm just kidding. So, this is not to, the important part of this sort of lesson for me, and also for wherever the shoe may fit, is that when we begin to get more honest with ourselves about what's happening and what's happening inside of us that might be in the way of our awakening process, that we don't do it in a sense of judgment. We don't do it in a sense of diminishing ourselves. We do it for the purpose of awakening, to expand ourselves, to grow into the possibility of how life can be more peaceful and more loving, and we can experience more abundance in our life and more possibility, right? So the intention for this sort of more radical sort of self-honesty around how we might be obstructing or delaying this infinite presence and power from being made known in our experience is the purpose of it is absolutely spot on for what we really, really, really want, right? Because we can name our list of wants and desires and all the things that we want in our life, but what we really, really want runs deep in us, yeah? And so when we begin to contextualize our goals in life along something that is the truth of our being, then we are guided to do the work that would be absolutely spot on for that recognition, that realization, that awakening to take place. So you and I have to decide just how deep down the rabbit hole we want to go. And for some of us that have been doing this for a while, or for some of us who have hit a wall in our life, I don't know if anybody has hit a wall in their life besides me, but that wall that sort of just wakes you up and just turns you around. And it ain't the hokey pokey, but it is what it's all about when it comes time to spiritual growth and well-being, because sometimes our attention is not garnered by just the normal everyday garden variety stuff of life. But when stuff happens, right? When difficulty happens, when challenge happens, when our best laid plans and our dreams and all those things that we have worked hard for and we're so convinced was the way and would have a great payoff for us, and we had studied and we went to school and we got the degrees and we followed the path laid down for us, by those who perhaps had gone before us and had prescribed what would be the American dream or the ideal or whatever. And we ran that out and we bumped up against this wall where we felt devoid still. Something was still missing. In fact, maybe the ache was even deeper. Does anyone relate to this? 6 or 7. So good. So we'll become more of a vocalized church here. We'll all have more fun. And you can laugh at me or you can laugh at each other. It doesn't matter as long as we're laughing. And so when we have those sort of experiences that first look like they're against us, right? Like, oh my God, how could that happen? That wasn't in the plan, was there some error in the logic here? Did I take a turn that was wrong? And at the level of our judging mind, our egoic mind, which always, sort of looks outside of ourselves to try to lay the blame and the problem, That's where the mind wants to go. But there's something in you and I that runs deeper than that. And what runs deeper than that is quietly saying, look here. See how this is turning you to something that you have not been paying attention to, right? The whole idea that's metaphorically represented in the prodigal son story is that, there comes a time when we stop looking outside of ourselves. And we run those journeys of seeking but not finding until they hit a wall. And the good news about that is if you can't go anymore in the direction of the delusion of where your happiness and your well-being lies, then that is your turning point. That is the pivot spot for you and I to turn around and to return to the sense of well-being that is within. And sometimes we have to be radically honest with ourselves in order to recognize how we have been running away from good, running away from God, running away from peace, running away. We've been pursuing something which would be seeming like an imposter, a false God, a reasonable facsimile, but it always falls short. It always comes up empty. And when we recognize that, then we are given this golden opportunity, to make a different choice and to turn around. So what I wanted to chat with you about today was, how do we know that anything is real, right? And when we think in terms of our spiritual life, the obstacle oftentimes to people believing in this possibility that life could get better, and it has nothing to do with what's going on out here. Many people stop short of believing in that. And the reason they stop believing in that is because the surface mind has been running the show, has been, captaining the ship, has been in a position of power and authority, and has wielded control over our perceptions and what we believe and what we know. And in fact, people who are doubtful about all religion say things like, people who believe in God or higher powers or greater realities, they're delusional. They're delusional. And the idea is behind that is get real, right? Let's get real. Have you heard that one? Yeah, let's get real. So the question is, what is real? What is real? Is it what our senses tell us is real? And you and I know that there are animals and creatures on this planet Earth that have senses that are far greater than ours. So just even at the level of the animal kingdom sensibilities, what we would say is only what I can perceive and what I can experience sensorily is real, and anything that I can't is not, would be delusional, because there are creatures that can experience things that we can't see and hear things that we can't hear. So what is going to be our definition of what's real? What's that? What? WTF, thank you. Thank you. And with the definition that goes with it. Yes. Where's the faith? That's right. You said it was mine, oh mine, till the end of time. So, we have people like Jesus and Buddha and all these great spiritual masters, and they keep pointing to this reality. And our surface mind just says, does not compute. I don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean the peace and love is here now, and there's abundance in the universe? All of those things to a part of us seem to be dreamy and fantasy and wishful thinking and Pollyannish, and all those ways that we can dismiss it if we're stuck in the place of our mind where we have to see things in order to believe them. Yes? We've many times have said, I'll see it, I'll believe it when I see it. Right? But the challenge of the spiritual life is to believe, having not seen, in the conventional sense. Jesus said, blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. Blessed meaning that they didn't take a leap in faith. They took a journey within. And they explored everything that they could recognize that was in their conscious mind or in their state of beliefs or their perceptions that would be an obscuration or an obstacle to the recognition of something greater. And this is why the spiritual life is not devoid of work that we have to do at the level of the mind and the heart. And just to not leave the idea of what's real, I mean, we have this corollary now, this metaphor that works really well as quantum science has, I better stay close to my notes on this one. Quantum science has come to tell this story about what's real, yeah, that speaks very powerfully to this idea that there is no such thing as some objective reality that's out there. In fact, they've gone so far as to say there is no out there, out there. There's no out there, right? Because how could there be any out there apart from your perception of it? Because whatever is out there is only known in here. So the classic experiment that opened this whole thing up was when they were trying to determine the nature of light and find out whether light was a particle or light was a wave, because it seemed to have both of these dynamics, both of these characteristics. And so they found out that if there was a measuring device in this experiment of trying to discern whether it was a particle or a wave, did I say wave? Yes, okay. That the behavior of what they saw actually changed if there was an observation. In other words, the possibility that it was one or the other collapsed into a particular outcome. And so the conclusion, which is very troubling to the scientific mind, is that it exists as possibility, and that it is the observation, that would be you and I or whatever is observing, makes a difference in what is seen and what is perceived. The wave is a field of infinite possibilities. We live in a field of infinite possibilities. Jesus said, all things are possible with God. And that the behavior and what is seen depends on the observer, on the observation. In other words, just by observing, we are participating in co-creating our universe. This is very troubling to that part of our mind that really wants to believe that things are just as they are. But as soon as we can let go of that, as soon as we realize that there is no such thing as a fixed reality that is out there apart from us, and that we are somehow not having any effect on, as soon as we can let go of that, and maybe we rely on science, or maybe we rely on some intuitive feeling that you and I have inside of us, that there is something greater than this material universe that we are so attached to. As soon as we can let go of that, then we open up the space in us in which that field of infinite possibilities becomes our playground, becomes our laboratory, becomes our test tube, the crucible for our own life experience, to see how it could be that if things aren't as we see them, then maybe things are as we see them, but what influences how we see then impacts what happens. And this is this whole field of the law of attraction, which you've heard about over and over again, about how it is that we do have an influence on our outer world. And there's a whole continuum of ways that we can look at that, and some of them I agree with, and some of them I think go too far. But let's just know, if we can just hold this idea, that the universe is malleable, that life can change, it's not fixed, and that how we interact with our life has a lot to do with how life shows up and how we experience life. So the world that, the Newtonian world that we have having to let go of, that's the idea that it's like a completely mechanistic, predicted outcome. If we have to let go of that, you realize that we now suddenly live in a time when we have to be questioning everything. We have to be questioning everything. We have to become inquisitive in our own experience to find out, is this what I'm experiencing right now have to do with something that's happening out here or something that's happening with her? No. I knew I'd wake you up with that one. Let there be peace on earth and let it begin with him. I know, I see you singing on Sunday. I know what you're saying. It's just a really important context. And if you're new to this, it's going to sound like, heretical, and particularly to your rational scientific mind. But if you've played around with this for a while, you have a track record. You have some anecdotal evidence in your own experience that has revealed to you that how your state of mind and heart does change what gets projected out there. Yeah. And of course, sometimes don't we see it better for our friends? Yeah. Our friends. We have a gal friend or a guy friend, and they're really stuck in a belief, that's so strong. They had a bad experience in their life or multiple, and then they have this belief about how it is, and that expectation just gets, played out on top of the universe of anything or anyone that looks like that experience. The color wash of that perception is given to that person immediately, and that person ends up looking to be yet one more example of how that is true for that person. And yet another person who doesn't have that history and that programming and that conditioning can experience that person entirely different and see their behavior as being completely innocuous or innocent, as opposed to the person who has a real trigger with that other person and then knows that that what they're seeing is not just what that other person is doing, but how we receive that person's behavior from our own history. And we can't ignore it. If we're willing to be honest enough, if we're willing to be inquisitive enough, we come to this inescapable conclusion, which we say here often, is that the source of my well-being and the source of my discomfort is within me. Breathe. The source of my discomfort and the source of my well-being is within me. And the reason that must be true is because there is no such thing as a fixed reality. How many of us would all agree on how we would perceive a particular situation or a person or a circumstance? But would we agree that we would see it through the lens of our own perception, and that perception is unique to who? To us. To us. And it can be also unique to a group. It can be a tribal perception, yes? We're not just egocentric, but we can be ethnocentric, and hopefully we're moving into the larger global-centric perspective, which has a less of a bias. But we must come to know that, and when we know that, when we realize that how we are experiencing life and how we are experiencing other people has everything to do with what we believe, then we realize the work isn't so much to fix our life or to fix them, which is one of our favorite activities, is it not? We love that one. But it's to recognize that whatever this filter is that I'm looking through is coloring my world. And is there a way that I can be gently, and I say this with the most sincerity, compassionate in looking at myself? It is not about self-deprecation. It's not about beating ourselves up. It's not about feeling crappy because, we realize now that we don't see perfectly and we don't love everybody. It's the opposite of that. It's looking with compassion and love, which is your true nature, and bringing love and compassion to the awareness of who and what I am is a gentle way for me to come into that radical honesty where I'm allowed to experience that and own it and see it. And when I can own it and see it and I can hold it in that way, then I invite something greater and truer to be revealed. Course in Miracles says, I could choose peace instead of this. In other words, that there is always an opportunity for you and I to see through the eyes of truth. And it's not easy. And the first step is not to do the affirmation, I'm sorry. First step is to do the denial or the recognition of what's not true, who I am not. So that in the recognition of who I am not, there is a willingness to let go of that perception with the help of God, with the help of truth, with the help of wisdom, with the help of love, in a context of compassion, so that as that begins to loosen and let go, and that no longer becomes my predominant way of seeing and being in the world, then what I can believe can change. What I can believe about you, what I can believe about life, what I can believe about anything and everyone. And this is our spiritual journey that you and I have signed up for. And it doesn't matter, we get to it today or we get to it tomorrow or 20 years from now. I don't see any way around it. And when I say that, I want to add one caveat to this, because sometimes we get confused. When we think we're supposed to, hold ourselves accountable for everything we experience in life, sometimes people take it to the nth degree and then believe that you need to become a doormat for everything that happens in life, or that there isn't any justification for you holding boundaries and barriers and saying no. And because we owe it to ourselves and to our community and to everything that we care about in our life is to have civility and to have safety in our community, in our relationships. And so we don't abandon those values in the midst of a recognition that our source of our discomfort is here. Is that clear? Does that make sense? Because so often we go to the one extreme or the other. If I have to give up blaming everyone, and I guess I'll just blame myself and let anything happen that wants to happen. And that's not the lesson. It's nuanced. And we must remember that we have a place and a responsibility in our life to create the conditions under which we can grow and evolve ourselves into this greater understanding. And sometimes we have to create those conditions and take actions that will do that. And let's just take a moment and just turn within for a moment as we bring this to a close, as we recognize that right here and now, that we have a profound opportunity. This lifetime affords us. And whatever thoughts we might have about tomorrow or then or there, let's just recognize that what is in our heart right now? What is that next impulse for your heart, calling you to know, calling you to be, calling you to realize? If you knew you were absolutely safe to be radically self-honest and to just look with open-hearted clarity, honesty, and truth, what is it that your heart would tell you? This is that coming to the altar sort of posture of the heart, where you let go of all of the stories, all of the facts, all of the narratives and who you are and who you're supposed to be and all of your shoulds, and anything you're attached to, let it all go. Just for this time. Any sense of needing to be something and just to be. And that you stand before the presence and the power and the love that unconditionally embraces you and encourages your deepest realization and most powerful awakening. Sit with this for a few moments. What does your heart want you to know? What does willingness guide you to reveal, to uncover, to express? Knowing that my highest intention is to be the unobstructed way of God instead of being in the way of God. What would I know? What would I recognize that would further that intention? In this private sanctuary, there is nothing that you recognize or realize that can harm you. It is only for your good. It is the will of love seeking to be made known through you, as you, right here. And we can continue this exercise at any time, simply asking that provoking question. How can I be the way of truth and love and peace? And what is in the way? Keeping it close, keeping it real, staying home in the privacy of this honest inquiry reveals our next step on the path of freedom. And so it is.